Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this week's edition of Benchmark, in our first installment, we review the state of the nation as tourist arrivals exceed expectations. Then in our feature segment, we turn the spotlight on Hemaka Amarasuriya, chairman of NDB Bank and non-executive chairman of Singer Sri Lanka, for his take on Budget 2012. And we wrap up this edition by asking economist and LMD columnist Samantha Amarasinghe to assess Sri Lanka's fiscal outlook. That's the lineup for Benchmark this week. Hello and welcome to Benchmark. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. We start our show by taking a look at tourism data that show arrivals reached an all-time high in the first 10 months of this year. Indeed, the record of annual tourist arrivals of just under 655,000 last year was broken in 10 months. And the betting is on a cumulative for 2011 of close to 900,000 visitors, nearly 150,000 more than the targets set by the authorities at the beginning of the year. And with 2012 in mind, there was good news mid-last month when the government backtracked on its decision to levy the $50 fee on visas under an electronic travel authorization, the ETA system, from the 1st of January, following widespread objections from industry stakeholders. Travelers from SAARC nations will now be charged $10 and others $20. As for 2011 thus far, the numbers to 31st October reflect an improvement by more than a third over the same period in 2010. A little over 665,000 foreigners graced our shores in the first 10 months, with Indians almost 140,000 and British tourists over 85,000 accounting for a third of inbound tourists. The other key source markets for travellers to our land have been the Middle East, 44,522, Germany, 43,369, and France with 40,345. Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka says that inflation continues to fall because of improvements in domestic supply conditions arising from the high growth momentum of the economy. CBSL announced early last month that inflation as measured by the Colombo Consumers Price Index, or CCPI, fell to a 14-month low of 5.1% year-on-year in October from 6.4% at the end of September. So, the year-on-year decrease in the rate at which the cost of living is accelerating has fallen for the third consecutive month. There was also a slight dip in the average annual change in prices by 0.1% to 7.1%, the central bank says. A year ago, the respective inflation rates were 6.5 and 5.7%. CBSL's Department of Census and Statistics says in a press release that the fall in year-on-year inflation is attributable to lower prices of food and non-alcoholic beverages. The bank's monetary board, and recently there's been an absence of demand-driven inflationary pressures, and that domestic fuel prices will be adjusted going forward to reflect persistently high international market prices, and that this would minimize the adverse impact on future inflation and the economy. And finally, on November the 15th, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka's Monetary Board resolved to maintain policy interest rates at existing levels, which means that the repurchase and reverse repurchase rates will stay at 7 and 8.5% respectively until its next meeting scheduled for 20th December. The board states that the outlook for Sri Lanka's economy remains positive and that a change to the existing monetary policy stance is not warranted, even though inflation and the inflation outlook remain benign. Inflation will continue to fall this year, it predicts. Time for a commercial break now. We return shortly with an exclusive interview with Hemaka Amarasuriya. Stay with us.